This video is going to be an introduction into distributive property. For some, it might be a review. Either way, this is going to go over distributive property and will take us into the beginning of solving equations. So, our first sentence says, blank blank are expressions that have the same value for all values of the variables. And that is equivalent expressions. So equivalent expressions. So equivalent expressions are expressions that have the same value for all values of the variables. So what that means is on either side of the equal sign, the variables are going to equal the same amount. The distributive property is used to find the blank of a number and a blank or a blank. The distributive property is used to find the value of a letter or expression. Distributive property is used to find the value of a number and a letter or expression. Looking at the definition of the distributive property, you can see down the left-hand side, that is an algebraic definition, and to the left side are numeric examples. So, we look on the left, most commonly found is this definition where it's A times the quantity of B plus C. And what happens is that you are going to multiply A times B and then A times C. And you will see that you end up getting AB plus AC. Okay? The distributive property simply tells you to multiply. That is important. You need to remember that the distributive property means to multiply. So if we looked at our first example, the numeric one, we're going to multiply 3 times 4, and then we're going to multiply 3 times 2, and we're going to add those two numbers together. So you get 3 times 4, which is 12, plus 3 times 2, which is 6, and that would get you 18. Looking at our second example, it says the same thing, but now the A that is multiplying the quantity is in the back. It doesn't matter where the A is as long as it's directly outside of the parentheses. So now we'll just take that A and multiply it to the front, which is B, and then multiply it times the second term, which is C. So we would get BA plus CA. So again, if we look directly over at our numeric example, we're going to do 2 times 3, and we're going to do 2 times 5. 3 times 2 is 6. 5 times 2 is 10. When we add those together, we get 16. We can do the same thing with subtraction in the middle of our quantity. So again, we're still multiplying. We're just changing the operation that's happening inside the parentheses, and that's okay, completely legal. So we're going to again multiply the number on the outside to the number on the inside. So we're going to do A times B, which gets us AB. And now we're going to do A times C, which gives us a negative AC. If we look directly to the right. We're going to do it with numbers now. We're going to do 5 times 6. Notice that our negative sign follows. And we're going to do 5 times 4. Okay. 5 times 6 is 30, minus 5 times 4, which is 20. 30 minus 20 is 10. Look at our last example. Again, our A has moved to the back, which is completely okay. No big deal there. We're still going to multiply it by both terms inside the parentheses. So we're going to do A times B, which gets us BA. Notice our subtraction sign comes to follow. We're going to do A times C, which gets us CA. Looking directly next door. Alright, now multiply same way. 4 times 8. Again, notice our subtraction sign follows. We do 4 times 6. So now we can multiply. 4 times 8 is 32. 4 times 6 is 24. 32 minus 24 is 8. And that is our final answer. Alright, let's do a couple example problems. And like I said, tomorrow we will do the ones that are in the boxes that say your turn. So if we look at the first one, again, these arrows are super important. You might think they're stupid, and that's fine, but this way I know you're not going to forget to multiply to something inside the parentheses. So we're going to do 3 times x, and then our addition sign comes down. We do 3 times 2. So our final expression looks like 3x plus 3 times 2 gives us 6. Second example, again, arrows, you're going to do 2 times r, subtraction sign comes down, 2 times 4. 2 times r is simply 2r. 2 times 4, subtraction sign comes down, 2 times 4 is 8. We cannot combine those terms because they are not alike. Let's look at number 3. Here we have to do a couple things. We must, 1, recognize that the number that we have to multiply, or that is being distributed, is in the back. And then also we have to fill in everything ourselves. So, first things first, n times n, our plus sign comes down, n times 6, okay, plus sign comes down again, n times n gives me n squared. 6 times n simply gives me 6n. Okay? Again, the your turn part of this packet will be done in class tomorrow. Okay, distributing a negative can be tricky. Follow the same steps that we've shown earlier, but you need to be careful when multiplying negatives. This is hugely important because a lot of you like to drop negatives. So we'll just underline, let me make this bigger. We're going to highlight this part. Be careful with negatives, super important. Okay. Let's do our first example. Things haven't changed what we're multiplying or how we're multiplying. So you're going to do negative 2 times x, so negative 2. Negative 2 times 7. When we multiply, we get negative 2x. Positive sign comes down. Negative 2 times 7 is a negative 14. You can rewrite this as negative 2x minus 14. Here where it says rewrite the opposite as, and you're going to rewrite the opposite as plain old subtraction. So instead of writing negative 2x plus a negative 14, we can just simply write it as negative 14. In the second example, we're going to distribute the negative 3y to the 5 and the negative 3y to the y. So up front, we're going to put a 5. Notice that the subtraction sign came down, and we're going to multiply the negative y there. First, so we needed to distribute the negative 3y. Now we must simplify. So 5 times negative 3 is a negative 15y. Subtraction sign comes down. Y times negative 3y gives me negative 3y squared. Okay. So now we have negative 15y. These two negatives can be turned into a positive 3y squared. And we rewrite add the opposite here as addition. Okay, looking at this last example, you'll see that there's no number in front, but there is a negative sign. We take that as reading as a negative 1 times 2x minus 11. So we're going to multiply both of the terms inside by a negative 1. Negative 1. When we multiply, we get negative 2x. Negative 1 times 11 is negative 11. Again, we're going to turn these two negatives into a positive, so we end up with negative 2x plus 11. Remember, we're going to do all the problems that say that are under the your term category tomorrow. On this slide, we're going to take everything we've learned and combine it all together. So we're going to distribute like terms, and then we're going to combine the like terms. So first, we're going to distribute the 2 to the 6x, and then the 2 to the negative 4. Notice we're not doing anything to that positive x because it's sitting outside of the parentheses. So we need to distribute the 2. So we're distributing the 2 to the 6x and the 2 to the 4. So 2 times 6x is 12x. Minus 2 times 4 is 8. And notice that x just keeps coming down because we haven't done anything with it yet. Okay, looking here, we need to combine like terms. So if we look right here, we can see that we have a 12x and we have a regular x. So those two terms are alike, so we're going to combine the 12x and the x to get 13x. We've used those two, and now our negative 8 comes down. Let's do one more. We're going to distribute the negative 2 to the m and the negative 2 to the 5. Notice that this negative 4 we do nothing with because it's not inside the parentheses. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight it. Okay, so negative 2 times m, negative 2 times 5, and remember that negative 4x just stays on behind. So negative 2 times m gives me negative 2m, plus negative 2 times 5 gives me a negative 10. When I rewrite this, I'm going to get negative 2m. Plus and negative you can also write as subtraction, and then the negative 4x just keeps coming down. Okay. You will see, can we combine any of these terms or any of them alike? We have a 2m, a negative 10, and a negative 4x. No, none of them are like terms, so we just rewrite it because it's in its simplest form. And let's write that in. Simplest form. You need to understand when we're doing distributive property, you only multiply what is directly in front of the parentheses. And as we look here, you can see that it's just this negative 3 that is in front of the parentheses. So you're just going to multiply that negative 3 times x and the negative 3 times the negative 4. So we're gonna rewrite the x because we haven't used it yet. So it's going to be x minus 3 times x, which is a negative 3x, and negative 3 times negative 4 gives me a positive 12. We can see that we have two like terms. We have an x and a negative 3x. When we combine those two together, we get negative 2x plus 12. There is no more, we can't simplify that any more than it already is, so we're just going to leave it. Okay? And remember that the your turns we're going to do in class together.